Let us know when we can start and we'll get going.
Okay.
Good evening and welcome to the Finance and Claims Committee meeting of the Norwalk Common Council for today, Thursday, February 9th, 2023, beginning at 7:06 p.m. And I'll begin the meeting by calling the roll of the Finance and Claims Committee members. Council Member Jen McMurr.
Present.
Councilmember Nora Nadelski-Eichner.
Present.
Councilmember Diana Revelous.
Present.
Councilmember Ed Camacho.
Present.
And Councilmember Greg Burnett are present. Councilmember Brian Meeks will not be joining this evening, and Councilmember John Cotties will be late, but we have a quorum. Thank you. So we'll move on to public participation. We did not receive any emails submitted for tonight's meeting. Larry, do we have anyone who has a hand raised that wishes to speak at this time?
I don't think so. If anyone would like to speak, please raise your hand electronically now and I will unmute you. No, I do not see anyone, Mr. Burnett.
Okay, very good. Thank you. So we will close public participation. Before we move on to item 4, which is approval of the minutes. Mayor Rilling has joined and would like to make a few comments. Mayor Rilling.
Thank you, Mr. Burnett. First of all, good evening, and thank you to the Finance Committee for all of your commitment to serving on the Finance Committee as we undergo another budget process. Tonight, you're going to be seeing the first initial draft of the budget as presented by Mr. Dakowitz. As most of you know, that by the time the budget season is over and the process is done, there will undoubtedly be some changes from the document you're going to see tonight. So starting off, every year the budget process is certainly a challenging one because I need to be, and we need to be, cognizant of several competing priorities while proposing a fiscally responsible budget that does not jeopardize our residents' ability to afford to live in our community. How much we raise taxes on Norwalkers must remain a major consideration in our 2023 and 2024 budget, and every budget for that matter, past and the ones that we'll be working on in the future. As you're well aware, residents have been dealing with unprecedented rates of inflation and rising costs of goods and services. Many have not even recovered yet from the fully recovered from the pandemic, losing gainful employment or having to take employment that barely meets their needs. Therefore, we must work together to have a fair, equitable, and balanced approach to the budget. We must have a budget that addresses both the critical funding and services that seniors, students, and all residents need, while making sure we don't make Norwalk unaffordable for our residents. That's why this year I have proposed a budget with an overall increase of 2.46%. Among other things, my budget includes funding for improving and maintaining Norwalk's world-class assets, such as our parks, green spaces, and incredible beaches, by supporting improved field maintenance and usage, combating flooding, and pursuing sustainability efforts to combat the threats of climate change, supporting local businesses and entrepreneurs, improving traffic and congestion by building upon our transportation infrastructure, and increasing mobility by installing more sidewalks, bike lanes, and trail systems, providing critical services for those in need, especially the most economically disadvantaged among our community members, investing in mental health services for children and families, and perhaps most importantly, supporting our schools so they can continue to provide a world-class education for our students. At the beginning of this budget process, I asked all of my department heads to be conservative in their budget requests. I asked them to remain at 3.5% increase or lower. The city budget is virtually flat. After all my department heads reported, we came in at an increase of 0.75%. The Board of Education came forward with a request for 12.69% increase. As you know, I have a track record of increasing the Board of Education's budget year after year at much higher rates than all of my predecessors, demonstrating the city's ongoing commitment to making sure every student in Norwalk has access to a world-class education by making smart investments in our schools and our educators. And I'm proud of the progress we've made in the past decade on behalf of our students. They are the future and most important resources that we can invest in. My budget at this point in time includes a 4% increase for the Board of Education. This is nearly a $9 million increase, and it would build upon the progress we've made for every student in Norwalk. While this increase is significantly higher than in what I proposed for the city budget, it is less than the Board of Education's full request. This is because it is absolutely critical that we keep all needs in the community on top of our mind. I go back to Ms. McMurr's op-ed about wants versus needs. Needs are absolutely critical. Wants are nice. If we can do that, and if we can't, then we have to wait for a period of time before we can. When it comes down to it, we simply can't afford everything and expect many of our residents to take the hit. We must balance everyone's needs. The Board of Education's request of a 12.69 increase would equal approximately a $27 million increase to last year's Board of Education budget. It's simply not equitable for the community, nor does it balance the needs of our other ongoing city priorities. If we move forward with that funding request, it would mean that taxpayers would see an average tax increase of 8 to 12% citywide. A tax increase of this nature would be nothing short of irresponsible, and it is certainly not sustainable. I'd like to remind all of you that we've prioritized our schools since I came into office, and the schools have made historic progress in increasing the quality of education. In addition to supporting historically high operating funds for our schools, last year, we announced several plans to upgrade our neighborhood schools. In 2022 alone, we put forth our plans to build a new Norwalk High School, completed the groundbreaking and now working on building the new Cranberry Elementary School, welcome students in the newly renovated state-of-the-art Jefferson School, and before that, the addition to the Ponus Ridge Middle School. We made historic announcements that after more than 40 years, students in the South Norwalk community will finally have a neighborhood school. One neighborhood school at a time, the city of Norwalk is working to deliver the best learning environment for students throughout Norwalk that will only continue. I know that some will feel that this budget does not go far enough to fund our schools. I am committing today that the city will continue to seek out creative ways to fund a number of critical services, including mental health services that are allocated somewhat in the Board of Education's request. So we're going to be finding ways to fund those mental health services and be able to take that burden on ourselves. And we look to build upon relationships with community providers and nonprofit organizations that will help us meet those critical needs. This is a fiscally responsible budget. It represents a fair and equitable balanced approach. It balances many of the city's priorities while continuing to support historically high funding for our schools without jeopardizing our residents' ability to afford to continue to live in the school and the community. I look forward during the budget process to working with all of you, to having these discussions and making sure that we put together a fair and equitable budget. And again, I do thank you all for the efforts that you've made and the efforts that you will be making in the coming weeks and months. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Rilling. We will continue on the agenda. Before we move to the approval of minutes, please let the record show that council members David Hooverman and council member Nicole Ayers have also joined the meeting. So item 4 is approval of the minutes of the following finance committee meetings. We'll take the first one, January 12th, 2023, which was the special joint Finance and Claims and Board of Education Finance Committee meeting. So we have a motion on these minutes. Councilmember Jen McMurr, thank you. Do we have any additions, deletions, or changes? I have 2 that I see on page 2 under the staff lifting. Alexandria Estrella should be listed as superintendent as opposed to the chair. And then under others, Nora Najelski Eichner's name should be removed. It's a duplicate. Nora is a member of the committee and is listed above. Those are the only changes I see. Are there any others? Okay, hearing and seeing none. All those in favor of the approval of the minutes with the necessary changes, please signify by a verbal aye or raising of your hand.
Aye.
Okay, all those opposed have the same right. Any abstentions? We have one abstention, Councilmember Ed Camacho. Thank you. Moving on to the minutes from the January 12th regular meeting. Do we have a motion on those minutes? Councilmember Jen McMurray, thank you. Any additions, deletions, or changes to the minutes? Can you please mute your phone if you're not speaking? Thank you. As far as changes to the minutes, I have a couple. On page 1 under staff listing, the correct spelling for the tax assessor is ASSESSOR. So if we can make that correction. And then on page 5 of the minutes, the last sentence on that page, it should state, she said this would be for about 15,000. Please add the words items or bills to that sentence. On page 6, the second paragraph from the bottom, again, the correct spelling of the word assessor. And that completes the changes that I had. Are there any other changes to the minutes? Hearing, seeing none, all those in favor of the minutes with the necessary changes signify by a raise of hand or verbal.
Aye.
Thank you. All those opposed have the same right. Any abstentions? Councilmember Ed Camacho is abstaining. Thank you. That completes the minutes. We now move to items 5, 6, and 7 on the agenda, which is the Claims Committee report for February 2023, the narrative on tax collections dated February 2023, and the monthly tax collectors report dated January 2023. So over to you, Lisa B.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. I'll do the claims first because there's no vote needed. It's for informational purposes only. There was actually only one refund that we issued during the entire month, and it's just for your informational purposes only. So with your permission, I would move on to the January end of month report and the narrative that reflects it. We are pleased to report that as of the end of January, we were at 90.28% of our collectible levy, which is pretty much exactly where we should be in January. And I was somewhat relieved because, as you're aware, we were not able to bill our motor vehicle supplemental billing until they're actually going out this month. So our collection rate really did not take a hit from that at all. We're right where we need to be. And the first week of February saw very robust collection activity because February 1st was the last day to pay. So we won't really know exactly where we stand with the collection overall until we close out the month of February. But that being said, we're pleased with where we were for January. In terms of billing, those supplemental motor vehicle bills are at the printer now. They'll probably be mailed next week. They are due, as you voted at the last meeting, they will be due March 1st, payable without interest by April 1st. It's about 15,000 bills that are going out, and the levy for those is an additional $4.4 million. So we're on track with that. our collection agency activity, that third-party collection agency that the council approved in 2022. We collected more than $300,000 in the month of December and another nearly $150,000 in the month of January. Another mailing is going out today. Things are going very well with that. And the only other thing that I did want to bring your attention to is we are still working on our software conversion. We do anticipate that we will be cutting over to our new system on the 1st of March. It has been going very, very well. We're working with the new vendor. The assessor's office is working with them as well. This is only the assessor's office and the collector's office are two divisions that are changing over, but it's been going very, very well. So that's in this monthly report. And I'm hopeful that by the time I speak with you again, in March, we will already have cut over, but I'm glad to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you, Lisa. Any questions for Lisa? I did have one question, Lisa. We're slightly behind with our tax collection rate compared to last year. Any concerns, or I know you indicated in the narrative that the cutoff was the end of January. Norwalk residents had till February 1st, so we might see some additional tax payments. But any concern at this point with being almost 2% behind from last year?
No, that's a good question, but I'm not at all concerned because we did take in so much in February. I was actually still posting today payments that were made at the bank branches on February 1st. So those payments have made their way back to us and we're still posting, we're still processing mail. So I'm not concerned at all. If we saw a drop like that as of the end of February, I would be very alarmed, but I'm not concerned at all.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions on the tax collectors report? Okay, seeing none. These three items are for informational purposes only. So we thank you for providing the update, and we'll look forward to next month's continuing update.
Thank you. Absolutely.
Moving on to item 8 on the agenda, which is to receive the Oak Hills Authority monthly financial statement for December 2022. And we have the chairperson of the Norwalk Park Authority, Joe Androsco. Joe, how are you doing?
Doing great, thank you. Just
Great.
the Oak Hills Park Authority, not all of Norwalk.
Yes, I'm sorry. Thank you for the correction.
So happy to give a quick update. It's obviously wintertime. This is financial performance through December. The incremental performance of December is minimal. So the story that was, kind of set through September, October is still what we're seeing, and we'll continue to see that really through March. April is the time frame when rounds and things like that really start to go as it starts to warm up. But we did, in December, we voted to create modest increases in greens fees and in season passes. These are actually pretty mild season increases. So, no major controversies there. And kind of just rising, actually a little bit less than inflation this time around. And then the other thing that happens during the winter is, to the extent that we can get capital improvement projects done and we have budget for it, we try to do that. So we've been deploying some of those assets and getting some of our capital work done. So that's always exciting because that kind of is the real improvement zone for the park. Another financial update is that we have a line of credit that we have used in the past. We haven't had to use in a few years because we've had some operating cash, and we've actually started building a capital reserve as well. But due to inflation, due to our financial position now, we thought it was a good time to increase that a little bit. So we've upped that from 200,000 to a 225,000 line of credit. It's just an opportunity to do that, where if we ever do need it, we may need a little bit more just in case prices continue to be high like they are. And finally, I know what's usually on people's minds is the restaurant and the contract for the restaurant. There are some past due balances on the current contract, and we have been working dutifully with the operator to make sure that those are put into a plan to be repaid in full. It is going to take a little bit of time, but we have been making progress. And I'd say it's really good faith negotiations that we've been in, protracted, but constant progress. So we are actually ready to come to some conclusion on that. And, you know, we'll kind of be able to provide more details when everything is said and done.
Thank you, Joe. Any questions for Oak Hill? Just on the last item that you shared with us related to the restaurant. So is the restaurant still in service currently?
The restaurant's closed for the winter right
Okay.
now, but it does expect to be open mid-March. Excuse me. For a similar to what they did in prior year, they're going to do expecting to do a St. Patrick's Day kickoff to the season.
Greg, may I ask a question?
Yes, yes.
Joe, about that line of credit, do you lock in an interest rate now, or does that float based on when you draw that down?
I think we've locked it in. So it doesn't lock in at the time of drawdown, but it's I can't remember exactly the rate. I don't want to misquote it, but it's somewhere in the six plus range.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, seeing no other further questions or comments. Thank you, Joe, for the update, and we'll look forward to seeing you next month for
Thanks, everyone. Good evening.
updates. Great, thank you. Moving on to item 9, and I will read the request as noted, requesting a special capital appropriation in the amount of $425,000 to increase the appropriation to fund account number noted, the Silver Mine driveway improvements. This capital appropriation shall be funded through $425,000 of authorized but unused general obligation bonds or notes of the city. The $425,000 of bonds or notes of the city shall be issued in accordance with the provisions and terms set forth in the original bond resolutions that authorize the issuance of bonds or notes of the city for project number as noted. Do we have a motion on this request? Councilmember Jen McMurray, thank you. And we have on the call with us Bill Hodel from the Board of Education to provide background and narrative on this request. Bill?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, this is the much talked about project at Silver Mine Elementary School. In the interest of safety and the very narrow areas and small parking areas, it has been decided by the community that something needs to be done. While this project was developed in concept a number of years ago, a allocation was approved in year 2020 for $1.5 million. So we went and had a design. There were quite a few delays. earlier, a couple of months ago, we went out to bid, and the lowest bid came from B&W Paving and Landscaping. That was one of two bids that were received. And unfortunately, that was over the amount that had initially been approved. We were about, what was it, 1.744 million, which was over the amount of 1.5. While we took a look at the existing overall capital budget allocated to the Board of Ed, and we were able to repurpose some funds. Half of that was funds previously allocated to, or roughly half of that was allocated to paving projects. So we thought that this would certainly fall into that category. The remaining half, or a little more than half, was from other areas in the capital budget where we suggested if the best way to do this would be to reallocate those funds as opposed to asking for new funds. As a result, I've explained this at various committees and have received approvals. And here I am today in hopes that we receive this approval in order to move on to the Common Council next meeting, I believe is next week. So that's where we are at this point. Any questions?
Are there any questions or comments related to this request? I did have one question, Bill. So you're closing out 9 projects. Are those 9 projects still in process, or have they completely been completed, and these are funds that are now available that can be reallocated?
That is correct. They've been completed, and it will be a great time to reallocate them right now.
Okay, thank you. Okay, if there's no, oh, yes, Councilmember Jen McMurray.
Sorry, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to say I'm really glad to see that this project is moving forward. I know a lot of the Silvermine families have been asking for this for a few years, and I'm glad we were able to reallocate things and make this project move forward. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
And that's a great question, and you might have mentioned it and I missed it, but what is the projected time, assuming approval takes place, that that the work will actually be done?
So we've been working with B&W Paving already to get submittals in place. Submittals are a way of contacting vendors who would need to supply the goods. Some of them are long lead time items. They have been working with us, even though they don't have a contract, to give us that information and based on availability on that time frame. So we hope to have long lead time items ordered very soon, and the project will start the day after the students graduate in mid-June, and it will be completed minus perhaps maybe a tree or two and some grass, but the paved areas and the lighting will be available for the first day of school.
Great, thank you. Okay, I'll call for the question. All those in favor of approving this request show by a sign of raising your hand or a verbal aye.
Aye.
Okay, all those opposed have the same right. Any abstentions? The request is approved, and we'll move on now to the full Common Council for review and approval on Tuesday, February 14th, which is next week.
Thank you.
Thank you. We now move to item 10, which is the update from our tax assessor related to the revaluation process. Over to Bill Ford.
Thank you, sir, for having me here tonight. At the chairman's request, we've come to just provide some information about the revaluation. Vision Government Solutions has been in the field inspecting properties. They've inspected over 1,500 properties. Of those properties, a little less than 20% had people home to provide access to the properties. Of the 20%, give or take, that were home, they're running at about a 50% acceptance of providing access to the interiors of the homes. Our procedure with Vision Government Solutions is going to be that they then send letters to any of the properties that they tried inspecting that they could not gain access to. And we've discussed now a second letter in addition to that. So if they're in an area and they can't get interior access to a property, or if nobody's home, they send a letter out on those properties. But they complete an exterior review of the property while they're there, the first visit. That provides them sufficient information to have a general idea of the condition of the property. It is always best to gain interior access to get the best data. The most accurate data provides the best values. And that's what we're hoping to have. Prior to the inspections and everything, we worked with Vision Government Solutions to finalize the data collection information, data elements to collect, different levels of what are different data elements, like the condition and grade of the property, different levels of those items. So if the condition is average, good, or excellent, that's what we've been doing. So they have inspected over 1,500 properties, and we're moving ahead with additional inspections. They have one individual here. She's been inspecting all of the commercial properties and been doing a great job providing a lot of back and forth information while she's doing those inspections. So that's where we're at. There have been a couple of phone calls about the inspectors, and I want to stress something very, very much. Our inspectors are only interested in the real estate. No inspector related to the city or Vision Government Solutions will be asking any personal questions. They're not going to ask for your birth date or any information about the individuals. They're only interested in the real estate. I know that was a concern of some of our officials as to whether or not there may be some other things going on. It is not any of our people that may be doing anything like that.
One question I have, Bill, is what is the process if a homeowner sees one of the assessors at their door and they have any hesitation, who should they contact to gain a level of comfort in terms of letting them into their home?
So they can contact the assessor's office. If they have any confusion whether or not the person is a Vision employee, the Vision employees have ID cards. They're wearing, the yellow vests. They have a letter of authorization from me. So it's not, just Joe Schmo coming out to the property. They actually have a letter with their name, their vehicle identification on it, the vehicle make, model, the color of the vehicle, and the license plate are all on the letter that I provide. That information is also with our customer service department and with our police department. So we've distributed the information about the inspectors that are out in the field.
Right, thank you. Councilmember Nora Najelski-Eichner, and then Councilmember David Hoofman.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Mr. Ford. And this, may be a matter of hindsight being 2020, but I do wonder, given the really low rate of uptake so far, I do wonder if it might be worth sending a preemptive letter. As you and I have discussed in previous meetings, I think there's a tremendous amount of confusion and concern. People have been, I think, rightly well educated over the last few years to try to avoid scams, particularly our seniors. If you were getting upticks of 40, 50%, I'd say, great, it's working. Let's catch the people on the backside. But with this level of inability to enter, I do wonder if it's worth considering doing a preemptive letter, particularly to the extent if you could notify a neighborhood, people will be in your neighborhood this week. I'm just wondering if that might increase the uptick rates, which might be better in the long run. Putting it out there, I really, you know the business, but I know I have heard comments from people who are concerned, confused, not understanding, worried that these people are scammers. So I do think that all of our good scam prevention efforts are working. Unfortunately, in this instance, maybe a little bit against us.
Agreed. And we are discussing ways that we can provide better information to the public as to what areas the different collectors will be in at different times. What happens with these revaluation companies is they use different staff at different times. And somebody will be assigned to one neighborhood, somebody else will be assigned to a different neighborhood. And what happens is they're not there. They may be there one day that week and not be there till the following week. That's kind of the issue that we run into with a letter saying, okay, everybody's going to be in your area on this date. That's not actually the way that it occurs.
Yep, no, I can certainly understand that. And I know you're well aware of the problem, but I do want to appreciate, like I said, I want to give shout outs to all of our very thoughtful, very careful and prepared Norwalk residents. You're doing us proud in being careful about scams. And I do appreciate that.
And I have been contacted by 2 of the districts about trying to provide some kind of flyer in their mailers. And I'm working on something for that as well to try and get the information out there, reason for the revaluation, how we value the properties, that type of stuff.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Councilmember David Hoover.
Thank you, Chairman Burnett. Really just sort of building on what my colleague, Ms. Najelski-Eichner was talking about. Are we doing a regular cadence of notifying people, of letting people know? Because I'm getting, a lot of people didn't really know this was happening. And I realized that we have seniors who don't necessarily use social media. We have people who aren't, don't go on the city website very often, or don't know how to navigate the city website. I mean, what are we doing? A broad range of things to notify folks of what's happening, not just a single letter, but other different media as well, so that we're making sure that people know this is coming, and maybe that will help with the uptick. I have to agree with Ms. Najelski-Eichner that what you guys are doing is great, but I'd love to just see a better response rate.
So we provided a press release. We've had a number of different news organizations do articles on the revaluation. I had a phone call from somebody that basically said to me, well, why didn't you tell me? And I said, well, I explained the different ways that we have done, put the information out there. It's on the website. It's all these different places. They literally told me they don't read the newspaper. They don't go to websites. I finally asked them if, and they basically told me they don't even read the mail that they receive. And I could not figure out how to contact this person after the phone call. We are trying to put as much information out there as possible as it becomes available. As I just said, 2 of the districts regarding their mailers, we're looking at putting together a flyer to put that into their mailers, and we're going to try and get the information out there that way as well.
So you're sending mailers to every property, every taxpayer within the city?
So the process starts with the revaluation company is doing inspections. If they cannot gain access to a property, then they send a letter directly to that property requesting they contact the revaluation company, Vision Government Solutions, to have an inspection performed. If they don't respond to the first letter, then a second letter goes out advising them of all the benefits of having the inspections performed, telling them that this is the best route, that it provides the most accurate data, et cetera, et cetera. So there will
why
be
don't we send
letters.
I'm just
on
curious
each
why
property.
we don't send an initial email to every homeowner, every taxpayer. Why is that?
So the big problem with sending a blanket email to every property owner.
Not email. I'm talking about a mail, an actual.
I'm
mail.
sorry. You said email, so I was responding.
I'm sorry. I meant
Well,
mailer.
Even a postal letter. The reason that we don't send it out is we may send them a letter now. Somebody may not be in their neighborhood until June. So that kind of runs into the situation. And the other thing that it does, I have seen in other areas where it created scams when the blanket letters went out saying, hey, somebody's going to be in your neighborhood inspecting properties. It's like a blanket notice to those entities that try to scam people.
Okay.
Yes, Councilmember Jen McMurray and Councilmember Diana Revolus.
Thank you, Chair. So I was just doing a quick search on our city website, which I think I've said this multiple times is not super user friendly. So I'll give you a pass there, but it doesn't seem like there's any information updated on that about this current program and assessment or the appeals process or anything. And we also have a spotlight section at the bottom of the homepage that would be, I think, well utilized in this area to make people even more informed than the mailers, because there are people who go on the website and do a quick search, and it looks like the information there is from 2022.
So right now, the 2022 information so it's going to be, I'm currently at the same time as doing the revaluation. We're finalizing the grand list for 2022, which we hope to be publishing very shortly within the next 2 weeks. Once that is published, then the BAA for this time period we don't want to confuse people too much with the 2023 grand list versus the 2022 grand list.
Sure, that makes sense. I still think that you could utilize that web page and that spotlight to talk about the current situation going on too, and what people can expect. Just, I think the more places you can get this out, the better. And
I agree.
It's free.
We will review the spotlight section of it.
Okay, so I guess it's my turn. Thank you, everyone. My question might be actually quite mundane in all of this. What are the hours of operation that these assessors come out to the homes?
The inspectors are, they leave City Hall usually around 8:30 and can work as late as 5:30.
So that's working hours of probably most homeowners that would be at work, right, as well?
Yes, and that's
Especially in
why
the climate that we are, that everybody needs to work. So why, instead of mass mailers, do we not focus on, let's say, a street or I don't know, 10 properties a week, call them directly and make appointments to come to their home, instead of, even because I can completely understand in today's day and age, not going online, not going in my mailbox, not going to see, looking at things that are just junk mail, not going to the website. So if, just especially since you said you had a conversation with one of the owners, why wouldn't we try to just designate making appointments with people, and even on, maybe, I know it might be a little bit extra, I don't want to do that, but let's say on a weekend or different hours that people are actually home there, then they know that it's you. That's less problems with scamming, and that's actually more equipped for your time, because when you do go out, it's not going to be repetitive, because the person and you have dictated an appointment to come to the property.
So regarding the calling of people, we do not maintain phone numbers of individuals within the city. We don't have the ability to do that. Regarding, so there will be Saturday visits. We don't like having the Saturday visits unannounced. People,
Right, of course.
I've been in the business now almost 30 years, and hurts to say that. The times where people are surprised by somebody on a Saturday is much worse. So that's why we don't do
I would
Saturdays unless
definitely,
it's a scheduled appointment.
of course, I'm definitely saying Saturdays as a scheduled appointment, but in the tenor of, like, those same owners, especially if, let's say, for example, registered voters, we have their phone numbers, we call them for votes. So wondering if, and not to add to anything, but if we can call residents say, hey, we would like to assess your property. We want to know if you're available sometime this week or this month. And Saturdays are available if you're available to it. And just maybe it might take a little bit of time for the call, but definitely save a lot more time and resources once you actually get there, to not have to repeat, to not have to send duplicate mailers, so on and so forth. Just wondering.
And I will say that the inspection rates that we're getting are a little low, but they're typical for a revaluation.
Okay.
People do not like having anybody in their house, and especially assessors. They believe that any information used will only increase their value.
Yeah.
So the inspection rates, they're a little low, but they are typical of a revaluation. They're not incredibly low. It's not something where red flags are going off that we're not hitting the numbers that we should be hitting. In addition to, we do not have the staff to call all the homeowners and have a discussion like you're talking about, because it would not be a short phone call. It would have to explain the revaluation. It would have to explain, you're talking about a 20, 30-minute phone call for each one. And we do not have the staff to do that.
And lastly, I completely understand, again, not to add to you, just even in that, and if it's not, it's okay, but even in that, to minimize that length, just be like, that with any questions, that is definitely something we can assist or discuss once we're there, but just make the appointment. But if that's not available, I get it. It was just, a possibility of maybe that can be done. But I do get it if, you don't have.
Let me stress that the time, so right now it stops because of darkness. So as we get into the spring and the extended time period of lightness, they will be able to work later and be there when people are home.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much.
Great. Councilmember Nora Dujovsky Eichner, and then Councilmember David Hooverman.
Thank you, Chair and Mr. Ford. And the comment you just made actually relates to what I think I was going to ask. So what exactly, I guess I'm wondering if we're worrying about something that isn't actually that big of a deal. I mean, if you're expecting uptick rates that are this low, what are the consequences for the validity and strength of our reevaluation? I mean, is the external really sufficient in most instances? Do properties that are inspected inside and out tend to have less, or tend to fight their assessments less? Like, I guess I'm now trying to understand then what really is the objective here. If these rates are actually about what you expected.
So what we're looking for is properties that have changed. So we have the data in the system from the previous revaluation in 2018. We have it from the full revaluation where they inspected all the properties in 2013. So if properties have changed, if you've done work to the properties, that's most important. Any variations of information. Okay, so we're also looking for if something was inaccurately done prior. So somebody missed the side when they were drafting the house, they missed the side addition, or they missed something like that. We're trying to correct all of that information primarily. When renovations have been performed to a property, those are key. If you put in, and I'm going to use, we have neighborhoods that put in $100,000 kitchens, that will increase the value of the property. So that's the information we're looking for.
Okay, no, and that's certainly helpful. So, but what I guess I'm trying to, again, just a little bit, what are the consequences for this city in terms of, so I guess if you've missed a major renovation and you're therefore undervaluing the home, we're undervaluing our tax collection a little bit. And that's the risk here. I guess I'm trying to understand,
we will need to
in the range of sort of normal here, then are we still able to get sufficient accurate information from the external review to achieve your ends?
If somebody does the renovations that we're talking about, if they're significant, they're going to make sure that the entire property looks appropriate for that, if you know what I'm saying.
Right. Yeah.
So if we had a property, and this happens a lot, we had a property, let's say in fair condition. Somebody bought it. I should also stress that we have cleaned up a lot of information from sales and from building permits recently. A lot of work went on during COVID. People were home. They were like, okay, I don't like that anymore. And since I'm not going out to dinner, let me renovate that kitchen.
Yeah.
I had a discussion with somebody the other day. I said, the problem is a lot of those kitchens only take out for like an electrical permit. And we started reviewing some of those to look at where patterns exist that we can try and locate that information. And the person I was talking to said, oh, no, mine is down to the studs. I got building permits. So we do have that as well. People are taking out building permits. We're reviewing all the building permits. So we know if somebody took out a building permit for a brand new kitchen, we have that information from our building department.
Okay, great. So that's very just helpful to understand that we are not without resources here to try to be as accurate as possible. Okay, fabulous. Thank you.
Councilmember Jen McMurray.
This is very quick. All of us have campaigned, all of us have made multiple phone calls, like Councilmember Revolus was saying. Robocalls are very effective. Robocalls, you don't talk to anybody, you put a recording on, it robocalls everybody. I think that's another use of our resources if we can, and it would not keep you on the phone for 30 minutes per resident, I promise you. So I'm just throwing that out there as another idea.
But we wouldn't be able to schedule appointments like Councilor Revolus wanted with robocalls.
No, but you could let them know in another way if they don't read the newspaper, go on social media, et cetera, or read their mail, which again, I understand your frustration with that. We go through that too. It's hard to communicate with people if they don't want to be communicated with. But any which way you can communicate with them, because that is my profession. Let's do it.
Yes, ma'am.
Councilmember Diana Revolus and then Councilmember David.
And just to jump on what my colleague, thank you, McMurray said, and Ms. Chelsea Eichner, you just clarified that then you actually do have more pinpoint locations that you're trying to go to. It's not like a mass caller. Therefore, since you just did a major renovation, I can call you and say, hey, can we schedule an appointment? So just out of help with what was just said with the robocall and the fact that there's particular renovations that would then mark that, hey, I have to go here. Let me get on the phone with them. Let me send a robocall to them, something like that. Just saying, maybe a little bit more of assistance. It sounds probably more cumbersome, but just hearing the last two statements just minimizes that and can, at the end of the day, kind of save effort, time, and money by just doing the reach out directly.
So the reach out for building permits, that does occur. So if we know that somebody did a kitchen renovation, those people are called up. We have their phone number on a building department permit application. So those people are contacted in advance, and those have already mostly been expected for the current year, never mind next year. We cleaned up a lot of information. So a lot of properties sold in the last 3 years. Those properties that sold, we have interior photos of the property from the brokers, listings, and information that we have from the public realm. So we have that information that is reviewed and analyzed as well. So we have all these different connections as to how we're getting all the data into our system.
Okay.
Okay, Councilmember David Hooverman.
Thank you, Chairman Burnett. I'll be brief. I just want to build on something that Councilperson McMurray brought up, which is earlier she mentioned the spotlight section on the website. We also, we still have a COVID-19 button on the front, which actively takes you to a site. How long have we known that we were going to do this reval, and why hadn't we planned ahead for something along those lines? I feel like this conversation is about, hey, how can we catch up here to tell the public, as opposed to why aren't we doing these types of things in advance? And that's where I'll leave that.
So the revaluations are required every 5 years in the state of
Connecticut. And that's 5 years to plan for the next one. We had a pretty rough reval the last time, so we knew the better we can get information out, the more information that we can get out, the sooner we get the information out. If this happens every 5 years, why do we continue to have these conversations? That's the question that I'm asking.
So I'm sorry, I did not get to finish. I started to say, every 5 years, we're required to do a revaluation. Every 10 years is when a full inspection is required, where the people actually come out to every property and do those inspections. It's every 10 years. We had COVID, we had a number of other things going on during this time period where we weren't sure what process we were going to take. There was a potential that we could postpone the revaluation as well. We've looked at all this different situations, and we're here, and they've started doing the inspections. They will be ramping up more in the spring, okay, to do more of the inspections, and we will be getting the data and the information out to the public as much as possible.
Councilmember Diana Revelous, you still have your hand raised?
Oh,
You have.
no, I'm sorry, I'll put it down, but even hearing what was said, it just doesn't alleviate me from what I've been asking, but I didn't mean that, I left it up, but even what was just said mean we could reach out earlier, so I'm just agreeing, I guess, and I'll just leave it with okay. I'm gonna find the lower hand button now.
Okay, great discussion. I think our tax assessor has additional ideas to toss around, and hopefully we can continue to see an uptick in the outreach. Thanks for the update. We'll now move on to item 11, also from the tax collector's office, and it's a request as follows. Request approval for the extension of the software agreement with Vision Government Solutions Computer Assisted Mass Appraisal CAMA, including certain cloud services during the revaluation for amount not to exceed $35,694 for 2 years. Account noted. Do we have a motion on this request?
Motion?
Okay, Councilmember Diane Revelous, thank you. Over to you, Bill, for this request.
Thank you, sir. So Vision Government Solutions has been the city's software provider since 2013. This is just an extension so that we can continue using their software. The statement about certain online services, certain cloud services, the inspectors that are going out and their managers that supervise them set up a online system so that they can access data and look at it in the field and do different things as they go through. All of this data is actually public information. It's our property record cards. If anybody goes online, they can see all of our property record cards are out there. Our assessment data is available to the public all the time. What this is one part of it is the extension of our existing agreement. We need to be able to still use it in the office. And the online part of it is for the Vision Government employees, Vision Government Services employees, to be able to access it in the field. As you said, the account numbers there, this was already budgeted for in our system. It's just we discovered that the new document had to be signed by the mayor.
Okay. And this is again covering subscription fee and web hosting fee, both items.
The web hosting fee is actually free. It is for their employees to access it, but they need an agreement since it's our data.
I mean, looking at the backup information, I thought I saw a price for both of those items. I didn't see anything that was written as free.
Well, that's the way that it was just written, because it's the dollar amount is the amount for the software, for our use of the software. The web hosting portion of it is going to be free for the duration of the revaluation. The majority of the assessor's office staff won't be using the online web hosting data. They'll be using our in-office data. So when you call up to the front desk and one of my clerks answers the phones, they're using our in-house information. They're not using the data that's being prepared for the 2023 revaluation.
Okay, Councilmember Nora Jagelski-Eichner.
No, I'm just wanted to second Chair Burnett's concern on that. I'm reading the documents right now, and it very definitely has a $5,000 and some odd dollars annual fee for both years. So if that's inaccurate, do we need to have it revised before we vote on it?
So we budgeted for the $35,000 total. I think we will have it fixed before it goes to Common Council. Let me put it like that.
So the contract that was shared with us for this meeting,
I have to review that with our attorneys.
Is inaccurate?
I need to review that with our attorneys.
Well, then I
Because I have a summary of it, and my summary, I didn't read the entire contract. That's what I have attorneys for. Let me review it with the attorneys. I would really like to have this voted on tonight so that we don't have a delay in the revaluation. The online access for the government services, Vision Government Services employees is what made us discover the issue of the agreement being out of date. Our attorneys discovered when they were reviewing all the information, they discovered that the agreement was out of date and they wanted it updated.
I understand that. However, and I understand the sensitivity in the time sensitivity. However, the information that you shared with us, where you're saying there's a service that's free, but the paperwork that the backup that you provided clearly is stating there's a dollar amount associated with. So there's a disconnect.
And that's I need to find out what happened there. That there's not supposed to be any charge for the web hosting. That is supposed to be free, and it is for the Vision Government Services employees to access the data.
Could I make a comment? The total dollar amount is the same, the $35,000 or $36,000. Whether it's allocated to the web hosting or not, the total amount we're paying this vendor is $35,000 or $36,000, and those are the services we're going to get. I think we can check with our attorneys and clean this up, but I would really appreciate moving this forward to council, because we're in the middle of reval, and without this contract signed, it might delay the reval. And we're not even talking a dollar difference. We're talking about a detail in how the price was allocated on an invoice. We'll get it right, but I really think that if the finance committee could approve it, it would help everyone. And we will come back, Mr. Ford can come back and explain what got done. He'll do it at the council where all of you will be present.
Councilmember Jen McMurray.
I would just suggest that, yes, we all have attorneys, but something as important as a contract should be reviewed by the person presenting it. My husband's an attorney who reviews contracts, and I always read my own contracts. So I just think that is best practice, and I'm a little shocked that that wasn't done.
I apologize. Again, this was something that was brought to my attention. I'll say we rushed this. This was actually, I was advised of it right before the weekend. It was put onto the agenda on Monday. And it was rushed. I agree with you. I should have reviewed it clearer.
Councilmember Nora Jagelski-Eichner, and then Councilmember Ed Camacho.
Well, and I mean, I certainly understand Henry and or Mr. Dakowitz and Mr. Ford why this is important, but it of course does raise questions, right? If the contract, a copy of the contract that they gave you allocates, only $20,000 to the service we think we're providing, or we think we're having to pay for, then should we only be paying $20,000 for this service, right? So I'm reluctant to vote for a $35,000 appropriation if there's a possibility that in fact the error is on their end in the total, and they in fact,
I very much understand the time sensitivity. I don't know if there's alternate ways we could move this, but when they've put the contract forward with numbers for the services we are paying for that are lower than what we're attempting to vote for, I don't really want to vote for an additional $10,000 if we don't need to pay it.
The total amount that we are currently paying, we're already paying the 35,000.
But if you look at the contract, they've only allocated $20,000 to the services we require. So if they have, that's their work that they've put that in. So that then says to me, maybe in fact the services are only $20,000, right? I'm reluctant to overvote on something that is potentially their error, if that makes sense.
I don't think we would get an invoice for $20,000 if they took off the 10,000 from the 5,000 per year. The total is 36,000. And whether they call it 20 plus 15 or 25 plus 10 or 35 plus 0, we need all these services. We can't walk away from the hosting. The point is it's either included with a total of 36, or for some accounting purposes, maybe internal, they wanted to show a charge of 10,000. I really don't see how this changes anything with the relationship with the vendor.
Well, I guess because we haven't seen an invoice for 30,000. All we've seen is a contract for 35,000 that has the money allocated to something that we've also been told it's not supposed to be allocated to. So if you want to send me an invoice for $35,000, then I'll consider it. But I'm not going to vote on a contract that has information that is inaccurate to what you're telling me that it should have, right? That's not our job. Our sole job here on this committee, right, is to be monitoring the accuracy of our financial spending. And so on a representation that I've seen no documentation for, that makes me uncomfortable.
Councilmember Ed Camacho and then Councilmember Nora, excuse me, I'm just keep reading it. Nicole Ayers. Ed, you're muted.
There you go. I didn't get a packet, so I don't see the contract. But is there some way, since what Mr. Dakowitz and Mr. Ford are saying is that the total contract amount hasn't changed, and all of the services contained in the contract total of $35,000 or $36,000, can we just vote to approve the amount on the condition that it will be for all of the services indicated in the contract, whether some are denoted as being free or not free or whatever? It includes all of the services, and subject to a corrected contract being considered and voted on at the Common Council meeting on Tuesday or next Tuesday. Is that something we could do? So in other words, approve the amount conditionally in that way?
I'll hold on making a comment to that till all questions have been answered. Councilmember Nicole Ayers, do you have a question or comment?
Sorry, I was having trouble unmuting. I respect the position of Mr. Ford as well as Mr. Dakowitz, but my concern is that you are promoting that you do not want to affect the relationship between you and the vendor. But it would have been nice if you had that much due diligence not to affect the relationship between you and this council who has oversight over you. So you cannot come to this council, this committee, or the full council with partial or inaccurate statements and be emotional when we are not 100% okay with voting for it. I agree with what has been said by my other colleagues, but I am quite disturbed by the tone that is being presented, because we are essentially questioning, which is within our rights, questioning the accuracy of a document. So you cannot hold against us our due diligence, and that's what we are here to do. So I'm very disturbed, Mr. Dakowich, with the comment that you don't want to bother the relationship between you and the vendor. I hope going forward, you take that much emotion not to bother the relationship between you, this committee, and in general, the council. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I'd like to respond, please.
Yes, go ahead. And then I'm
Thank
going to call, for the question. There's a motion on the floor.
Thank you. You mentioned about reviewing the financial responsibilities and obligations of the city. I believe Mr. Ford had reached an agreement for $36,000 with the vendor. He said he thought that the web hosting was free. The documentation didn't show that, but the documentation agreed with the $36,000. So the total amount that is being expended and asking for approval has not changed. That is why I feel that we can clean up the details. And when you accuse me of respecting the relationship with the vendor more than the respect I have for the finance committee, that is not true. I respect the finance committee and the whole council very much. My point is, from an operational point of view, Mr. Ford and I have discussed this, and this contract was pushed through quickly because if it gets delayed a month so that the finance committee approves it next month and then it goes to the council, we may delay the revaluation. And it may cause us harm because we didn't get this approval. You are free to agree or not agree, or to approve or not approve. I would never question or challenge your authority. I was just trying to say, from a financial perspective, nothing has changed about this obligation. $36,000 is $36,000. This happens all the time in accounting and bookkeeping when the sub details are handled different ways by different accounting systems. That's why I am not concerned. If the documentation that we presented did not total $36,000, I would agree 100% that we have to review this and Mr. Ford has to go back to the vendor. But because the total was the same and a delay in approval might negatively affect the revaluation, that is why I made my comments. Thank you.
Could I just
So
point out-
there is a motion on the floor to move forward with this. As was recommended, we can table this item until the council meeting next Tuesday, February 14th, with the understanding that we will receive prior to the council meeting accurate information. I think the concern that has been raised is that what we're reading in the backup in the contract and what was stated, one item being free, another item, the backup contract showing a cost, we need clarification on that. So to allow opportunity for that clarification, this item can be tabled until the council meeting on Tuesday, February 14th. Council member Ed Camacho.
I'm not sure what motion that was. I'm assuming that wasn't what I had. That wasn't what I suggested. What I suggested was that that we vote on the item and approve the $36,000.
You made a comment. There's a motion on the floor. I just made the motion to table this item until the council meeting on Tuesday, February 14th, pending we receive updated information. So that is the motion that's on the floor right now.
And I definitely asked if we could table this. So I'm happy on the motion that was given, because I definitely did ask, could we table this? But that just kind of got put to the side.
I agree. I think it should be tabled until we can get clarification, but then it can move to full council if you're okay with that, Chair.
So we have a motion to table this item until Tuesday, February 14th. All those in favor of the motion to table show by the sign of raising your hand.
Aye.
All those opposed have the same right. We have one opposed, Ed Camacho. Any abstentions? So the motion to table has passed, and we will wait to receive the updated information prior to the council meeting. All right, moving on to item 12, which is the presentation of the fiscal year 2023 recommended operating budget. And we have our Chief Financial Officer, Mr. Henry Dakowitz, to make the presentation.
Thank you. Can everyone see the slides?
We can now, yes.
Great. Thank you. Let me just go through the table of contents. So we'll first talk about the budget process and the calendar, present the recommended operating budget. We'll also reiterate the COVID and ARPA funds that the City and Board of Ed have received. We'll look into a little bit of detail, the recommended operating budget by department for the city. Have a little discussion about the unrestricted unassigned fund balance known as the rainy day fund. And then we'll talk about the tax levy and mill rate, how our operating budget translates into tax levy and mill rate. So when we look at the calendar, we start with pro forma budgets were sent to each department October 28th. This is where the budget department sets a target. The mayor had issued us a guideline of 3.5% maximum. And we go through head counts, expected payroll costs. We send the whole package to the departments and we ask them to respond with their requests. They get their requests into us, we review them, and then we meet with each and every department between December 5th and January 11th to review their requests and their differences from our pro forma. The mayor's recommended budget comes out tonight. The Finance Committee has a public hearing on February 23rd. On March 7th, the Common Council sets the budget cap. It then goes to the Board of Estimate and Taxation. They meet with all the departments between March 8th and March 21st. They have a public hearing on March 22nd. And on March 27th, they forward their tentative budget to the council. As you're well aware, if they have a tentative budget that exceeds the council cap, that has to be voted on and approved. If not, the council sets the final budget cap one way or the other, April 11th. And then it comes back to the Board of Estimate and Taxation, who sets the final budget and tax levy on May 1st. Here's a historical allocation of the dollars. We look at the city local expenditures. In 18, it was 157.5. This current year, 23, 196.3. And we're proposing 197.8 for fiscal year 24. What I do on this slide is try to remind everyone that part of the city's budget is actually being spent on behalf of the Board of Education. In-kind services performed by the city, this is prepared by the controller and sent to the State Board of Education. And we have been spending in the area of $10 to $12 million a year on services that we provide to the Board of Ed. Our debt service on the Board of Ed's construction projects is $19.4 million. So we have $29.4 million, which is in our budget, but is really not on behalf of the city. If we deduct that, the local taxes that are supporting city expenditures is $168.4 million. This year, it's going down by 1.6 million, or a little less than 1%. Conversely, the Board of Ed went from 185 up to 217 last year, and we are recommending 226.6, but we have to add back these in-kind expenses to get the true total measure of local taxes supporting the schools. It has ranged from 211 up to 234, 244, 256 projected for fiscal year 24. That's an increase of 11.9 million from last year and a shade under 5%. So the total increase is 342 million. Last year was 414. We're looking at an increase of about 10.3 million now, which is a 2.5% blended increase. And when we look at the allocation, the city has been averaging about 40%, 39.7, and the Board of Ed is using about 60% of the local taxes for their operations. Just to remind everyone, this is the summary of what we have gotten from the federal government. The COVID money was given to the state and then it came back through us. We also got some from FEMA. So on the city side, we got 1.6 million from FEMA, 1.9 from COVID relief, some other small grants of 127,000 for voting, and 39.3 million of ARPA money for a total of $43 million. The Board of Ed got 7.15 million for COVID relief, another 450,000 from the Office of Early Childhood, 37.9 million in these state grants, the ESSER grants. The last one, ESSER 3, is the ARPA money, 24.8. The other two are just other state support of education, over 13 million, for a total of 37.9, for a grand total of 45.5. So in total, the city and the Board of Ed have received $88.6 million in federal funds, either directly from the federal government or the state, and the ARPA money alone was 64 million out of that. For this fiscal year 24, the mayor's recommendation for the Board of Ed is an increase of $8.7 million, or 4% from last year's approved amount of 217.8 million. Total recommended amount 226.6. On the city side, we are looking at a total increase of 1.5 million, or 0.75 of 1% over last year's approved amount of 196.3 million. The total recommended budget is $197.8 million. Looking at a line-by-line item by department on the city side, employee benefits, which is the largest category last year, is going down by $12 million, or 31%. That is the primary driver of why the city is only going up 0.75%. The next slide will go into detail, but for right now, let me go through the other departments. Debt service went from 35.3 million to 40.4 million, an increase of over 5 million, or 14%. As I've mentioned before, we are increasing the amount of debt we have, and at the same time, we are facing higher interest rates. According to our financial statements, on June 30 of last year, the end of the year, we had 305.5 million of debt outstanding. We issued in August 82 million par value of new bonds, but we did have about 26 million of old bonds that matured that we paid off. So if we look at the total debt outstanding as of now, we are standing at 361.6 million. As you know, the financial advisor did an analysis a year ago and said 400 million seems to be the point at which AAA bond ratings are in jeopardy in Connecticut. So we're currently at 361.6, and the debt service has gone up because the interest rates being charged are much higher as well. Police came in at 3.5%. Public Works went from 26.3 to 28.8 million, an increase of 2.4 million or 9.3%. Most of that is related to trash and recycling. We have an increase of our bills with city carding for recycling of $1 million. In the past, the materials that we separated would be sold and we would get a credit for recycling. That market has changed and we now have to pay for the recycling. We do not get a credit. Additionally, we're looking at an $800,000 increase in the costs for solid waste. So those two items compose 1.8 million out of the $2.4 million increase. If you look at just the general wages and contracts that have to go up, that makes up the rest of the 2.4 million. Fire department came in at 3.4%. Pension plans came in with an increase of 2.4 million. What's happened there is that we have our general increases of pension plans. And then we also had the actuary explain to me, we've had increased healthcare usage by our pension. So therefore, we had increases of $500,000 for the police, an increase for the fire, increase for the city pensions, and therefore we had $1 million increase out of the 2.4. That's why it's a little on the high side. The rest of the numbers are not terribly large. Some of the large percentages are on a very small base. The grants went up by $493,000. We have a $500,000 grant this year for the Redevelopment Association. We haven't had that in the past. Other than that, the changes are pretty straightforward. So we end up with 197.8 million for the city, an increase of 1.5 million or 0.75%. The Board of Ed went up 8.7 million for 4. The blended rate is 2.5% of an increase. Let's talk about those key drivers. So employee benefits and insurance went down by 12 million. One part is health insurance. In our preparations of the budget, we discovered an error was made about 2 years ago when we changed from United Healthcare to Anthem as our vendor. The controller had to set up new codes to handle the employee copays for this insurance. In error, those copays were credited not to the city's health insurance plan or fund, but to the Board of Ed's health insurance fund. It was accidentally, errors can be made by anyone. So we've had 2 years worth of underfunding the health insurance account for the city and overfunding the health insurance account for the Board of Ed. On June 30th of this last year, the balance in the health insurance account for the Board of Ed was 5.9 million. 5.2 million was that overcrediting for our employees withholding. So I've informed Mr. Osmani and the Board of Ed. We made a transfer. It's internal to the insurance fund from the health insurance account for the Board of Ed to the health insurance account of the city of 5.2 million. Because of that, we were able to reduce, this is a one-time, won't happen again, but we were able to reduce the amount we needed for this year's budget for health insurance expenses. Additionally, for OPEB, which is, it stands for Other Post-Employment Benefits, and it is primarily health insurance coverage for our retirees. So what has happened was that our OPEB trust fund is 95% funded. And that was because we funded it at the actuarially determined contribution rates. And for the last couple of years, we were fortunate with good investment returns for those fundings. In addition, most recently this past year, the actuaries informed me that the usage of health facilities and doctors was lower than anticipated. The combination of all those factors allowed us to, the actuaries calculated that our required contribution dropped by $8 million. Again, it's one time. They warned me, they've seen this in other cities because of COVID. Sometimes with COVID, older people did not go to the doctors and hospitals as they normally would. So this may go down, but we may have a rebound effect next year as people go to the physicians now that COVID has subsided. But for this year, we get that benefit. So we had a positive, in essence, a reduction of our requirements of 13.2 million. But I noticed that the balance in our workers' comp fund of our insurance fund seemed a little light based on the actual usages. I wanted to beef it up by $1 million. So I took 1 million of those 13 million savings and used it to increase the funding of our workers' comp account to make sure we had enough of a balance for future claims. Our debt service, as I mentioned, went up 5.1 million, and the pensions went up 2.4 million. Let's talk a little bit about a rainy day fund. Now, when you're evaluating a rainy day fund, the traditional measure and metric is to compare it to the total budget, general fund expenditures. So here were our total expenditures actual through 22, budgeted for the current fiscal year 23, and recommended for 24. Here's what our balance was, unrestricted, unassigned at year end: 69.7, 58.4, 72.4, and the most recent financial statements, June 30, 2022, we had 74.9 million of fund balance of our rainy day fund. Now, going forward, we have planned in our budget for 23, our current year, to use $4 million of our rainy day fund. So therefore, the next set of financials, if nothing else changes, the 74.9 would go down to 70.9. Our auditors state that when we specify a certain amount of drawdown of the rainy day fund in our budget before June 30th, they are forced to take it out of unrestricted, unassigned. It's still in our fund balance, but it's not in the rainy day fund. This coming year, we've increased the drawdown to $6 million. Again, if nothing else happens, the 70.9 minus 6 becomes 64.9. Here's the percentage ratio of the rainy day fund, 69.7, over the total expenditures. We were at 20%, 16.1, 19, 19.4. At the end of this year, we should be at 17.1, and the plan for next year's budget is 15.3. We budget for a balance of revenues and expenditures so that fund balance will not change. We are planning a $6 million drawdown. Consequently, our auditors will deduct that from our 6/30/2023 balance of 70.9 million. This is a very important factor when the rating agencies assign a credit rating. They look at a rainy day fund and say, remember, they're evaluating the likelihood that the borrower, the city, might not be able to make interest and principal payments on time. When they see a 70.9 or a $74.9 million rainy day fund, they say, well, if things really get terrible, they have $70 or $75 million to utilize to pay the principal and interest. So it gives them greater comfort, and that's part of the reason for our AAA bond rating. Let's talk about how the budget translates into mill rates and tax bills by district. So the budget last year totaled 414.2 million. The mayor is recommending a fiscal year 24 budget of 424.4 million. And we have a 4% increase for the Board of Ed, 0.75 for the city, a blended 2.46. So the recommended mill rates, the first, second, and third, which all get the same services, are 25.42, an increase of 0.8773 mils, or 3.57%. The fourth district, an increase of 0.8055, 3.26%. The fifth would be 25.3057, a 0.7340 increase, 2.99%. The sixth district, 24.4443, which includes the mill rate that the sixth taxing district asks us to collect on their behalf. So the total increase was 1.5112, 6.59%. The mill rate for the 10th district, which is motor vehicles, remains at 30.467. Using the medium home values from the 2019 grand list, and these are assessed values, 70% of market value. So in the first district, we're using 6,105. The increase will be $211, 3.58%. Second district, 5781, 199 increase, 3.57%. The percentages are the same because we've used the same median home value as we have previously. The tax bill for the third district, 7749, an increase of 267, 3.57%. Fourth district, 7025, increase of $222, 3.26%. Fifth district, 9,511, $276, 2.99%. And in the sixth district, 18,693, an increase of $1,155, 6.59%. In conclusion, we feel that this is balanced, fair. It shows fiscal restraint. It's affordable to Norwalk single-family owners. And as the mayor indicated in his opening remarks, it allows us to satisfy the priorities of the administration. Thank you.
We're open for questions, comments at this time, based on the presentation. Council Member Jen McMurray.
I promise mine is not controversial. I am just wondering if we will be getting either an email or a packet with this information to review further.
We have prepared budget books. Unfortunately, there were several last-minute changes today, which might delay the issuance. We had expected and planned to issue it tomorrow morning. I would believe it may go out tomorrow, but latest by Monday.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Council Member David Hooverman.
Could we at least get a copy of this deck for sure?
Oh, absolutely.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other comments, questions? I know this is the first time we're seeing the presentation, so need time to digest it and formulate your comments and questions, etc. So not obligated to do it after just seeing it for just 5 minutes ago. Council Member Nora Nadolski-Eichner.
Thank you, Chair. Just to refresh my memory from last year, we do have an opportunity to ask questions at the public hearing, correct?
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm sorry. I'm presenting Monday night to the BET and Tuesday to the full Common Council. So you can ask questions of me at both of those venues.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
To your question, Councilmember Nora Nadelsky, you're talking about the public hearing on the 23rd?
I was asking about the public hearing, but obviously, Mr. Dakowitz is correct. Presuming we get the budget books, tomorrow, I will probably be prepared to ask questions on Tuesday. So if we don't get the budget books till Monday, I'm not as confident about that. So that's why I was asking about whether we would also have an opportunity to ask questions at the public hearing for this committee.
Well, yeah, right, okay.
Councilmember David Hoopman.
I guess that sort of building on that question was, will we have them at least by Tuesday by the council meeting? Or you don't know, you're not certain?
Understand, there were changes made. The budget book is a 300-page document. We have to go through the document to make sure there are references to different parts of the budget in various areas. So we have to go through every table and every page to make sure they're coordinated. It takes some time. I'm hopeful that we can make all those changes quickly and get you the books tomorrow. My team, Tom and Agnes, have done a phenomenal job. We were prepared, as I said, to distribute the books tomorrow morning, but with some late changes, we just have to be careful and try to, we want a quality product out there, and we understand the time criticality, and we will try to get it to you before the weekend so that you have the time to review it.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, seeing no additional comments or questions at this time. Thank you for the presentation, Mr. Dakowitz. And we will now move to item 13, which is motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Thank you. All those in favor show by the sign of aye.
Aye.
Or verbal. All those opposed have the same right. Any abstentions? Thank you, everyone, for participating. And we'll look forward to receiving the slide presentation as well as the budget books in the very near future. So
slide presentation can go out first thing tomorrow morning.
Perfect.
And hopefully the budget books, we've had physical copies. We also will post it electronically for all council members and BET members. We're getting binders, which can be updated as different bodies review this budget. And we're hoping to get you those binders tomorrow.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of your evening. Take care.
Good night.
Thank you. Thank you all for your work.
Thank you.